Hello and welcome to the Business of Story. I'm Park Howell and I'm so glad you're with us today because you are going to learn how financial professional Jim Oliver revolutionized his often complex communications by simply using human storytelling to accelerate the growth of his firm. It's called Create Tailwind, and to generate enormous impact for his clients as they learn how to become their own bankers. Jim is a great example for what happens when you activate the business of story flywheel that helps you become better known, more likable, and immensely trusted, all leading to accelerating the growth of your enterprise. So you're going to learn all that and more on this edition of the Business of Story. If you're unclear on what I mean by activating your storytelling flywheel, then please listen to last week's episode with sales legend Bob Burg. Bob coined the popular sentiment that people buy from and refer business to people they know, like, and trust. My Business of Story flywheel is based on these three ingredients, these three acts of story, if you will, of being better known, liked, and trusted, all with the intent to ensure that your storytelling is successful to grow your business. Now, you're going to hear Jim's rags to riches story, a story that he was actually reluctant to tell until he had me on his Breakaway Wealth podcast several years ago. And guess what I did on that show? I pried that story out of him. The results of sharing his horrible upbringing in California in the foster care system, to working at a casket factory at the age of 13, to becoming a successful financial advisor, to ultimately sharing the infinite banking concept with his customers is really a remarkable journey.
But I wanted to see, how did people build it from nothing and became really wealthy? And Park came down to two things: businesses and real estate. Wait a minute, it hit me. That's what Dwayne McIntyre did. That's what he did when I was 13 years old. He owned a casket factory and he owned real estate. And he lived in Palos Verdes, which was the goal for me if I stayed in California. I wanted to live on the hill and overlook the ocean and see the sunset every night, right? That was my fantasy.
Jim Oliver is the world's foremost authority on the infinite banking concept, or IBC. He is a financial freedom and abundance advocate and coach, and has dedicated his career to breaking the financial shackles that bind people and business to unnecessary taxes and interest expenses. Yeah, doesn't that sound great? Well, Jim spent 12 years under the tutelage of the late R. Nelson Nash, the pioneer of IBC, and now spreads the message of IBC through his firm, Create Tailwind, his podcast, Breakaway Wealth, and speaking engagements across the United States. On today's show, you're going to learn what it means to become your own banker, how to use personal stories to build momentum with your storytelling flywheel to ultimately accelerate sales, how to create a path to infinite wealth without Wall Street, and how to break away from Wall Street and own your financial future. All that and more on this special edition of the Business of Story with my good friend, Jim Oliver. Jim, welcome to the Business of Story, especially in this new year of 2024. What a great way to kick it off by having you here.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And yeah, I'm excited about 2024 and all the things that we're going to accomplish.
Now, you work in the financial world, and we are going to be talking about infinite banking today, which is kind of a mind-blowing concept, but it's been around for a while, a way of becoming your own banker that I find very, very fascinating. Before we get into that, though, Can you share with us your backstory? How do you find yourself here in the infinite banking world?
Yeah, it's interesting, Park. When I was a kid, I was fascinated with money, and I was fascinated with it because of the lack of money that my adopted family had. And I learned kind of early in life that adversity is really what builds our character, but we have to do something about it. We have to take action. And so I was fascinated with money. I studied money from a very early age, even when I had a paper route at 13 years old. And in California, we're not allowed to drive a moped or ride a moped when you're 13. But I did ride the moped because I could do two paper routes. And obviously two paper routes pays double what one paper route pays. And so I was always fascinated with money and finance and what these people knew that lived in these really nice homes up on the hill in Palos Verdes or Beverly Hills or Malibu that I didn't know. And the people in my neighborhood, they obviously didn't know either. And I was bound and determined to find out what that was all about, like what those people knew that we didn't.
And you grew up in a very difficult environment, to say the least. Can you share with our listeners a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I'll go back to the very beginning. I have six siblings, and I was somewhere in the middle. I always get confused exactly where I was. I was almost at the end, but second to the last one. And I was the only one given up for adoption. And I was given up for adoption at birth. And my birth mother later told me it was because she was raped, and her husband, he believed that she was having an affair. And so either way, what he said to her is, if you bring this baby home, I'll kill it. And so I was given up for adoption at birth, and then bounced around in different foster care until I was adopted at 7 into a very abusive and dysfunctional home. And again, learned a lot of things that maybe we don't want to have to learn throughout our lives. But the constant theme was scarcity, a scarcity of money, a scarcity of being taken care of, feeling safe, all of those things. And so it built me into the person that I am, but it's that adversity and those scars that are kind of our superpower, right? I always think adversity as superpower, and because other people haven't been through it. And I know that I can withstand that, and I know how to get through it.
How many foster homes did you go through?
That's a good question. I don't really know, but the last few I do have some memories of the last few. And I actually had a foster mother who drowned me, and I had to be resuscitated. And I don't know what was going on in the 60s and early 70s in Los Angeles in the foster care world, but I can tell you, at least in my experience, it was not a well-run machine. Let's put it that way.
Oh my God! I mean, you were just constantly in survival mode. So
in survival mode.
This whole scarcity thing was just about, oh my God, how am I going to survive today? It sounds like, and you talk about this in your book a bit too, and it's a bit of a rags to riches story, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and it's funny, Park, because once I didn't focus, it wasn't about money. It was more about this scarcity and abundance mindset, right? And when I realized that wealthy people acted a certain way and poor people acted a certain way, and then you have a choice of how to act, right? And I'm not saying that you just have a different mindset, act. Well, I am saying your actions will build your wealth. I'm not saying you're going to be a billionaire. I'm not saying you're going to be a decamillionaire, but there are things and patterns in money that you can do to live like wealthy people live, and there are a lot of things that you can do to live like poor people live.
Yeah, that's the easy part, living like
That's
poor
the easy
people.
part.
Isn't that for sure? Now, you were kind enough to have me on your podcast several years ago now. I'm thinking, boy, this might have even been pre-pandemic on your Breakaway
It
Wealth
was, yeah.
show. And I remember you were interviewing me, and then something interesting happened within that interview that really triggered the storyteller in you. Can you take us back to that?
Yeah, when I was interviewing you and I said, "Hey, Park, tell me, like, show me what you do. Like, let's just do it live. Like, let's just expose it. Let's just go. And I always think that things that are authentic and organic are always better than things that are manufactured and processed. And so, including the show, right? And so you said, "All right, Jim, well, can you go back in your life and think of a time?" And I said, and it was like a time where this thing about money like kind of came to to a point, like a crossroads in your life. I can't remember exactly how you asked it, but it was basically, can you remember a moment where you felt like, oh, we don't have anything, we're poor, and I was embarrassed and everything else. And I told you we were always bouncing Inglewood, unincorporated LA County, and we would try to edge our way to these nicer areas, right? Like Hawthorne or El Segundo. And so one time we were living in El Segundo, and we moved all the time, right? I mean, 6-month lease, 3 months. I don't, it just seemed like we were getting evicted. So we were living in this neighborhood that was nicer for us, but we were in the worst house in the neighborhood. And I remember like meeting this kid, and I'm like, okay, this kid's cool. Like, we're friends. I don't know if we're playing at the park, doing something, playing some sport. And we're walking home, and I stop in front of my house, and I said, "Oh, this is my house." And he goes, "Nobody lives here. This is a vacant house." I was like, "No, this is my house." He goes, "This is like the worst house in the neighborhood." And I'm like, I guess I never noticed that. Like, I never thought about that. But now that you pointed it out, and so it made me feel very small, right? It made me feel like, wow, okay. It didn't make me feel good.
And then what happened?
Then I got motivated and I started thinking, like, I don't want to stay here. Like, this isn't what my life's going to be. I'm not going to be in the worst house in the neighborhood. I'm not going to be embarrassed of the car that I'm driving around in, or the clothes that I'm wearing, or the house that I'm living in. It's not going to happen. Like, I'm going to figure out a way to have nice things, to, like, it's funny because, Park, when we say somebody, hey, Elon Musk's net worth is, $1 trillion, whatever the heck it is. I have no idea. But his net worth, right? So if you have no money, then you are worth less. You're worthless, right? That's how you feel. And so when you're a kid and everybody's constantly pointing out to you that you're poor, and you're standing in line for government cheese, and you're getting, you know what you can buy with food stamps, what you can't buy with food stamps. I mean, you're right on the edge of collapse. Well, it gets your attention, and you can either just fold and complain and go, "Oh my gosh, that's just the way it is, and it's unfair," or you can say, "No, I'm not going to accept this. What can I do?" And it made me mad. It made me driven, and you're Tony Robbins says you're motivated by pain or pleasure. This was pain for me.
And then you got a job.
I did. So my adopted dad, he drove a trash truck, so I'm thankful that he didn't ask me to go to work with him in the summer that I turned 13. But my adopted mother, she worked in a casket factory. And in the casket factory, with a casket, you have basically some kind of box, whether it's nice, not nice, but they have handles on them so that you can carry it. And it's decorative, right? So all of that stuff, I worked in a factory that made the handles and made them nice and then shipped them out to be attached to the box. And it was called McIntyre Manufacturing. And so I show up at 6 a.m. Again, I'm 13. And I sit down at this little station. And it's this old wood station. And there's a hammer. And there's some other like things that the little tool like kind of dies. And they're like, okay, your job is to take this, bend all of these things like this. And this is how you do it. You hit it with a hammer, boom, 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 boom. Do it the other side, boom, 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 boom. And then you get it just right with the kind of like the little die thing that shows you how it's supposed to be bent. And then you put it over here, grab another one, and you do that all day long, right? Now, what I didn't realize is how tired my arm was going to get. And then I realized I better be a little bit ambidextrous right now because I can't swing that hammer for 8 hours with one hand. You got to give one a rest, right? Or one arm. And so I did that, and it was exhausting. At 9 a.m., I got a break. I got a 15-minute break. I slept for at least 12, 13 minutes of that 15 minutes on these boxes just in the corner. And I was like, wow. And I noticed a couple of things. One, I really didn't feel like I was either tough enough or just, I didn't think I would be able to do that the rest of my life, right? And then Dwayne McIntyre, who owned McIntyre Manufacturing, he would come in. He'd come in for an hour. He would direct people 2 hours, but never more than 3 hours in a day, maybe 4. And I thought, wait a minute. He owns this, but he's not working here. Like, what does he do? Like, I just didn't, again, I wasn't that bright. And so I was like, what? Like, he owns, but this place is small. He lives in Palos Verdes. Now, again, for anybody from Palos Verdes or people that have lived in Palos Verdes, and you'd say, Jim, that's not the, panacea that you think it is, okay? To me, living where I lived, Palos Verdes was everything. And it was like, that's what I want. And I thought, well, wait a minute. Why does he own this manufacturer, this little factory that started in El Segundo and then he moved it to Compton? I wonder why, right? Cheaper to run it in Compton. And so I just watched and I saw everybody else working their butt off and him getting the rewards. And I thought, okay, I didn't understand that. And so then, a few weeks into the summer, I'm at a friend of mine's house, and it was like off of 115th Street, which Park isn't even there anymore. Now there's a highway that goes right over 115th and Imperial. But we're walking down the street, and there are small houses. Some of them are vacant because this project, it's California. That took 40 years for them to accomplish this, right? And so some houses are vacant. Some houses are cracked houses. Some houses actual people live in. And we're walking along, and I look down. There's a guy pulling weeds, which is unusual in that neighborhood. There's some guy pulling weeds, and I look down, and it's Dwayne McIntyre. And I think to myself, what are you doing here? And I wish I had really good manners and said, Mr. McIntyre, good to see. That just wasn't me at that stage in my life. And he says, I own this house. I said, why do you own real estate here? You live in Palos Verdes, own houses up there. And he said, well, actually, I own real estate all over Los Angeles. Okay, so he taught me two things without saying a word to me, right? Is businesses and real estate. Wealthy people, they own businesses and real estate. Why? Because businesses create cash flow that goes to the owner. Rental real estate creates cash flow that goes to the owner. So it's pretty simple. I wish, Park, I would have been sharp enough at 13 to know that that's all I ever needed to know in life was something I learned in a few weeks in the summer working in a casket factory and paying attention to a guy pulling weeds.
Yeah, but Jim, isn't that funny? It is these moments in life, if we're paying attention, and especially in hindsight. I mean, come on, you're 13 years old. You're not, you're just coming of age and learning about this stuff. But when you look back, and I remember asking you that question, take us to a moment in time, and you shared that story, and it blew me away. I was like, wow, I was not expecting this kind of rags to riches story out of you. What was the impact of you telling that story on your own show?
Yeah, it's it's funny, Park, because I feel like I'm sharing all of these wealth secrets and all of this stuff on how to think and grow rich, and all these books and all of this stuff. I mean, hundreds of episodes, and people wrote me about that episode. They Because it was, once I told the story and shared with people something that happened to me, they wanted to comment, they wanted to reach out, they wanted to tell me something that happened to them, something about, like, either, hey, makes me thankful that I never had to go through anything like that, or that, hey, I did go through something like that. It was the most popular, or that it was the episode that more people commented on than any other episode. Maybe all the other episodes combined, people, when still years later, they'll go back and they'll say, what's this about story? I'm going to check that out. And they look at it and they go, wow, that was a great episode. So
Well, it's such a powerful story, and I think you were a little nervous in sharing it at first, and I was like, come on, Jim, let's do this thing. And I didn't know you from Adam. That was the first time you and I had ever chatted, and I've had the good fortune of being able to work with you since then on your stories and how you're using them. Your new book is a fantastic read because of the storytelling in it. Did that come from that moment on that episode where you realized that we've got something here in telling our own stories, or telling the stories of our own customers and the impact we've had, versus running with the numbers, which, just tend to ricochet off of our heads? We need to have that context of a story.
Yeah, what it did, what it made me realize is that it impacts people. And when you tell your story and people say, hey, that was the best episode, and hey, Jim, like, I can't believe that, man, it's, I had no idea. It made me want to write my book. It made me want to share with people and feel like I needed to share with people my story. And it's funny because, when you put it out on a podcast episode, there's however number of people watch it. But then from that podcast, I said, okay, I'm going to write the book, and I'm going to put, it's going to be the PG version of my life, but the MA version isn't necessary. I mean, the PG version is impactful enough. And I wrote the book. And so then now I get people, I didn't think about this, the people like in my neighborhood now where I live today in Florida, they're reading this book. And I'm like, uh-oh. And I even say in the introduction of the book, I'm writing a book that I don't want anybody to read. It's not that I don't want them to read it, but it makes me a little bit nervous or vulnerable because I'm telling stories in there that are painful from the past. But it gives people, like this lady the other night, she came up to me at my country club and said, hey, so-and-so gave me your book and I just finished it. She goes, I had no idea you went through all of that. Well, why would she? I've never told her that story, right? And so I think that when you are a little nervous about telling a story, but then you tell the story, then it's like exercising a muscle. You go, okay, well, you know what? That wasn't that bad. I did legs today, but I can still walk. I mean, and you see the positives, right? You feel like, hey, wait a minute, these pants fit a little bit better than they did the other day. And people are commenting on me telling the story. And it's like, okay, that's obviously helping that person. And ultimately, I believe that people want to be of service to other people. I mean, I see it in the way that you interact with your clients. I'm one of your clients. And you truly want to help me get my story out better. And so I think we all do. I want to help people become wealthy or to at least understand money and have opportunity. I really, truly do.
Jim, how did you get into the financial world?
So again, I learned everything I needed to know, but I didn't have the confidence that that was the way to go. And so what I did is I went to school. I got it, and then when I got out of school, I said, "Well, it's got to be Wall Street, right? It's got to be financial services. I mean, that's where all the money is. That's where all the people are wearing the Rolexes and this and wearing the right shoes and everything, right?" And so I got into that world, and I realized, and it was really interesting. Again, so many things that you learn in life, and it develops your storyline. Is I was going out, so in Wall Street, everybody, all of the firms offered me a job because there was no salary; it was commission, and they would call it "eat what you kill." Right? You got to sell something to get paid. And I'm like, okay, all right, I get it. And it didn't go very well in the very beginning because I knew no one. I was in Denver, Colorado. I knew no one. I mean, I knew my in-laws and they didn't like me very much. Okay. So I was calling out of the phone book, doing all this stuff. And eventually I had success. But I had success when I realized one thing is that the executives with the right shoes and the right tie and the right belts, those weren't my people, right? And the doctors and lawyers, I work with a lot of doctors and lawyers now, okay, but I'm not changing who I am. But back then, you had to have the right look, you had to have the right suit, it had to have the right stitching, and everything had to be that way, and that wasn't me. And one day I'm driving through Denver off of Evans, and if anybody knows Denver, and there's all this manufacturing. And I thought, I'm just going to stop into this place and see if I can drum up some interest, right? I mean, I had nothing going on. I had no appointments. I had no clients really that I had to service or anything. I was like trying to get clients. And I ran into this guy, and he's got like ripped jeans on and a shirt with a hole in it. And I said, well, so you have a welding shop? Yeah. And started talking. I used to work in this casket factory. We would do this, and it reminded me of McIntyre Manufacturing. Well, we got to talking, and he said, "Hey, can I buy you lunch?" I said, "Sure." So I went to lunch with him, got to know him, and you know what I found out, Park, is this guy running this welding shop was making more money than the doctors I was trying to talk to. And there were hundreds of these things. Not all welding shops, but a plastics formation company. I'm like, people need cones, right? People need stops in hospitals for equipment that you got to put down, all these safety things. And so those became my people. So I would go to the office, have the tie on, I'd rip the tie off, put some jeans on and a dress shirt, and I'd go out and start talking to my people. Well, I got to the point where I had $700 million under management. And I'm charging 1% because, Park, I'm an expert. Right? I'm a money babysitter, a money expert and a financial planner, right? And so I got this report one day, and it said, your clients have gotten 9.38% over this period of time. I thought, wait a minute, I got money in that. It doesn't grow 9.38%. So I started doing the math. And after you take out fees, expenses, taxes, everything else, 4%, a little bit over 4%. Then I thought, wait a minute. That means all these projections I'm doing, they're not going to work. All of my clients, they're going to fail compared to what they think they're going to get.
And that's because they're thinking they're getting this 9% return, but then they aren't seeing the hidden fees and realizing that, I'm going to have to pay taxes on this down the road when I start taking it out. You were smart enough to do the math and go, man, I've been telling them the wrong story. Because you woke up to it.
Story. Because that's the story how I get paid.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in Wall Street, right? I'm a financial planner. I'm getting you to put money with me. You pay me to do that, and then I help grow your money. And whether you grow your money or not, I still get paid, right? And by the way, I'm not managing your money. I'm not doing anything. I'm just a salesman. Right? I'm just selling you on these different platforms. I have nothing to do with them. I have no control over it, anything else. And those people that are managing your money don't have any control over the market. Right? I mean, it'd be like You probably would be better off if you learned how to play poker really, really well and went to Vegas, right?
So, Jim,
So,
this works for most financial planners. They're
yeah,
cool with all this. They don't care
yeah,
about that. Why did
yeah.
you care? How did you not fall in with everybody else that says, "Yeah, Jim, I get that, but that's just the way it works."
Because I wasn't coddled, and I wasn't like nobody told me that like I think that told me that I was the greatest thing since sliced bread, and so I was like, wait a minute, I had this justice trait in my personality that was like, what? This is the problem. This is what all those people in the inner city don't know. Rich people are doing this, and this isn't. That's not right. It's not. I mean, I had to feel like I was helping people. I had to feel like I was going to help people get financial independence and financial freedom. I mean, I wanted it. I had it. I at 38 years old, I was way ahead of where I thought I would ever be. So, but I'm telling people the wrong story. And so then I had to find out, well, wait a minute, I have 700 million under management. I don't need to go look any further. I have a group of people that have become very wealthy. And I analyzed all of my clients and I threw out all the lucky ones. I mean, if I was the janitor at Google, okay, throw that person out. Not that there's any good for you, but I wanted to see how did people build it from nothing and became really wealthy. And Park came down to two things: businesses and real estate. And if you're a real estate investor, you're in the real estate business. So, wait a minute, it hit me. That's what Dwayne McIntyre did. That's what he did when I was 13 years old. He owned a casket factory and he owned real estate. And he lived in Palos Verdes, which was the goal for me if I stayed in California. I wanted to live on the hill and overlook the ocean and see the sunset every night, right?
So
That was my fantasy.
to be clear on this point, though, Jim, is you were helping these successful blue collar businesses invest their money, and these guys were making good money, but not to the tune of what you were telling them they would be making because of all these hidden fees. And then you thought back to Dwayne McIntyre and said, okay, saving in the stock market is one way of doing it, but it's not the only way of doing it, and maybe not even the most profitable way of doing it. Adding to your portfolio, saving in the investing in the stock market would be to buy a business, run a business, or buy income producing properties like Dwayne McIntyre did, buy that house, even in a crummy neighborhood, and rent it out and build cash flow out of those other instruments, not just the financial instruments that are available to all of us in the stock market.
Exactly. So I started looking, and I had this person come into my life, and they had a jet, and they had some businesses, but there was one. I asked them, like, so what business bought the jet? I don't even know why I asked them that question. He said, no doubt, it's the banks. And I said, he goes, I have 4 banks on the western slope in Colorado. And I thought, banks, like small banks in little towns? I didn't understand banking. And about that same time, I meet Nelson Nash because I go to this seminar in Houston, Texas, and he does a 10-hour seminar. And I thought, he's this, 70-some-year-old guy. He's from Birmingham, Alabama. He's got an accent like I wasn't used to. Excuse me. And I spent 10 hours watching him thinking, okay, what's he going to try to sell me?
And Nelson Nash is the inventor of the infinite banking concept.
He is, yes. Yeah. He's the godfather, as the way I like to say it, is, he discovered infinite banking. He developed it. He developed, a great book to explain it. He tells some great stories in the book, by the way. And in his 10-hour presentation, he was a good storyteller. And I asked so many questions, and I couldn't decide if this guy was a shyster or he was brilliant. And after 10 hours, I didn't know. So he invited me back for another 10 hours. He said, I'm doing this again in a couple of weeks. Come back. this is cod. It's really not taught. And I said, okay. So I came back, and about 5 hours in, Park had hit me in the forehead like a ton of bricks. And it was like, this is brilliant. This is what wealthy people do. This is what banks do. This is how a bank operates. And banking is the most important business in the world, also the most profitable business in the world. And this guy's telling me I can act like my own banker, and my clients can do the same thing and go buy assets, not instruments. So not to get sidetracked, but why would I want to buy assets instead of instruments? Well, let's just take one small thing. Is the government is printing money like it's going out of style. And this is not political. It doesn't matter what your political affiliation, whether you lean left, right, doesn't matter. They're all doing it, okay? and it's not going to stop. So when they print money, the money in our pocket goes down in value. If our money that we have sitting on Wall Street, it goes down in value as well. But what happens when there's inflation, meaning prices are going up? What happens to my real estate? Well, the value of my real estate goes up because the rents go up. It's a simple formula, right? How much rent comes in, that's the value of that property. How about if I'm running a casket factory and casket prices, I just have to, if inflation happens, I have to increase my prices, right? And so assets keep up with inflation. Instruments are destroyed by inflation. So I went, okay, well, I got to go do this. I can't just tell people, hey, this is how you do it. Go ahead and go out there and good luck. I got to go buy businesses. I got to go buy real estate. I got to make mistakes. I got to do it all. And that's what I did.
You know, it reminded me when hearing your story a while back of me. I was growing up in the Seattle area, and I literally, Jim, I was in the second grade, whatever age that is. And we were sitting out on our back patio, and my dad was there. He's a civil engineer, heavy construction company, and he made a good living. He started from nothing, talking about a rags to riches story. He hitchhiked from Sheldon, North Dakota to Grand Coulee Dam after he graduated from University of North Dakota, and he only had $15 in his pocket. And he said at one point, a cowboy picked him up outside of Montana somewhere and said, "Where are you going, son?" And he goes, "Grand Coulee Dam." And he said it was in the middle of the night, and the guy shook his head and said, "You'll never make it." And I asked him, I go, "What'd you think when he said that, Dad?" He goes, "Well, maybe he was right." But anyways, my dad went, and he did very well, built a really incredible career in heavy construction. But we were sitting out on that back patio one day, and he was having a beer with the guy that had the money in the neighborhood. His name was Dan Benton, and he was in real estate. And Dan had the big fancy house. We lived in a very modest, mid-America type place up at Bellevue, Washington, which is now a very, ritzy area. But when we were there, it was nothing. And Dan Benton was sitting there, and he made his money in real estate. And I remember him, and again, I was only in the second grade, but I've never forgotten this. My dad was asking about real estate and how that all worked, buying this and buying that and buying this. And Dan Benton made this point. He says, you never actually own real estate. You just want to control it. And that, for whatever reason, really resonated with me. And then later in my career, as I was growing and building my ad agency, and we were accumulating a little bit of wealth, not a whole lot, but still getting there. So I was in my 30s. My dad had said he had retired since then, and he worked with 2 different hydrologists throughout his career. They'd have to bring him in to do the surveying, and they dealt with a lot of water issues, of course, in the Pacific Northwest. And he told me, he said, this one guy, we'll just call him Larry. This one guy retired, and he travels the world, And I said, oh, he made pretty good money as a hydrologist. He goes, not necessarily. He made all right money. He goes, the other hydrologist we used all the time, we'll call him Bob, he was phenomenal. They were both really, really good. We could go to either one. They were very good at their craft. He said, but Larry took his money and bought apartments and then rented apartments. Bob didn't do anything but lived off and tried to bankroll his salary. Larry gets to do whatever he wants in retirement. Bob doesn't. Bob is on a fixed income now and living off of whatever he saved in the stock market and other places. That was like lesson number 2 in real estate for me. And then mom and dad went out and they bought some, real estate holdings and whatever that we kids get to benefit from to this very day. But it really underscored to me this power of owning income producing assets.
I love that story, Park. And that story is so similar to a book that some of your listeners may or may not have read, but it's called The Richest Man in Babylon, George Clausen. It's an old book. And basically, it's that story. His friends come to him and say, look, we're about the same age. We've made about the same amount of money over our lifetime, but yet you have so much more than the rest of us. What do you do? He basically tells you got to put your money in motion, right? You got to put your money in motion to work. And what your dad's friend was saying is, look, if I can go buy real estate, do I want to use my money or somebody else's money to do that? Right? And so I like to ask people this question because it's a big question. It's a big number, and you can really visualize what you would do. But Park, if I would loan you $100 million today, and your only obligation was you have to pay me $5 million of interest 1 year from today. No principal, no payments for the next year, but at the end of the year, you got to pay me $5 million of interest. Would you take the loan?
And that's a $1 million? $100
million.
$100 million. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, of course I would.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So Park, let's reverse it. Let's say you asked me that same question. You want to, and by the way, Park, if you do want to give me this loan, we can talk after the show. So you're going to give me $100 million loan. I've got to pay you $5 million of interest 1 year from today. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take your $100 million and I'm going to go to the seller of some real estate or a portfolio, or I'm going to go to the bank and I'm going to get 80% loan to value. Okay? So that means I'm going to take your $100 million and I'm going to go buy $500 million worth of real estate. Now, when I buy real estate, I know I can get around 25% cash on cash. So 25% on the 100,000, not on the 500,000, right? Does that make sense? And by the way, if you're inexperienced in real estate, you're going to tell me that number is like 10 or 15%. And if you're really experienced and you understand leverage better, you're going to tell me that number is closer to 40%. Now, I use 25% because it makes the math easy, and I went to public school. No, I'm just kidding. So I'm not kidding about going to public school, but plenty of smart kids in public school. So I'm going to take your money. I'm going to make $25 million. I'm going to call you and I'm going to say, hey, Park, I'd love to fly out, see you, and take you to dinner and give you your check. So I do that. I fly out. We have great dinner. I hand you your check. You say, Jim, you want to pay any principal? And I say, nope. See you next year.
So what you've done right there is you've paid me my $5 million, but you kept the $100 million in your pocket that you are now using to accumulate $500 million, $500 million worth of real estate.
And it paid me $20 million, right? Because I made 25% on the $100 million, your $100 million. I made 25%. I had to pay you 5% of that, right? So, and I get to keep 20. So I'll do that forever. I'll fly out every year, give you your check, take you to dinner, wherever you want to go, every day, all day, and that's it. Now, that's what banks do, right? Is a bank has somebody come down, they deposit money in their bank because they think, well, that's a safe place. I need to have all my money in the bank, right? That's what we've been taught. Then, is that an asset or a liability to the bank?
It's a liability. Yeah.
Because the bank hasn't done anything with it, right?
But they got to give it back to you if you want it back, right?
That's right. Mm-hmm. And so that's the ideal thing. So the way that they turn it into an asset is they loan it out to somebody else. Because what the bank knows is that the borrower has to pay them interest. And then they're going to pay you as the depositor as little as you'll accept or as the market dictates, right? Okay. So in 2016, these are the numbers. Okay. This is from Bank of America. Somebody might say, well, that 2016, that's a long time ago. Well, it's all cyclical. So tell me a year you want me to pick and I'll pick it, right? Right now is not the time because we know interest rates are inflated. They're going to go down. They were down then. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's all cyclical. So in 2016, Bank of America, if you put $10,000 in the bank, they would have paid you 0.2% on your deposit, which is $20 over the next year. They were charging the average borrower 5.2%. Now, that includes their credit cards, everything, right? 5.2%. Now, our consumer brain says, well, that's only 5% more than they're paying me, Jim. That's no big deal. But that's not how a business works, okay? A business works by you take your cost and you divide it into your profit. So $20 goes into $520 26 times, which means the bank is making 2,600% more than you with your money. Now, Park, because you're smart and you understand this, you just said something earlier. They're going to take that money and loan it back to you. So in essence, a lot of times, because there's only one banking system in the world, we could talk about that, but that's this. It's like water, right? Water in Lake Michigan is connected to water in the Amazon, and to say it's not is silly because of the atmosphere. So we have this banking atmosphere system, okay? So that means that in the banking system, if you have money deposited and you have money borrowed, the banking system is making 2,600% more than you with your money from you. And you're okay with that. But what if you didn't have to do it that way? What if you could be your own banker?
And how does that work?
So that works by changing your behavior and acting like the bank, meaning instead of going and giving my money to Wall Street and then go do that with the banks, the money that I was going to give to Wall Street, I'm going to start to build a money pool to go buy assets. Then when I need to borrow money to buy things like cars, vacations, all of that, I'll borrow the money from myself, pay myself interest back. So now I'm recapturing all the interest that I ever was going to pay anybody else. And I'm starting to buy assets with my banking system because that's what the bank's going to do, right? The bank's going to finance that house and hope, and it's the collateral and the down payment. They're going to be in such a good position. They hope you default, right? And so I'm going to start acting like the bank. But what I have to do is I have to understand. If I know what's happening, I'll know what to do, right? Well, what we as humans, what we struggle with is understanding truly what's happening to us, right? Whether it's, the food we eat, the doctors we see, the medical treatment that we seek out. I mean, we're believing that everybody else tells us what to do in our lives, right? The banker tells us whether we can get a loan or not. The financial planner tells us what to do with our money. The medical doctor tells us what medicines we need, right? We're not smart enough to do it on our own. Or are we? Well, when it comes to money, you are. But if you don't know something and you need to know it, what do you have to do? Is you educate yourself, right? And what's the best way to educate yourself? Is to listen to stories of people and examples of what they did. It works.
That's the whole Tony Robbins thing. I remember struggling as a young copywriter when we had 2 kids at home and I had zero money and really crap income, and I felt worthless. I was beating myself up over it, and I bought the very first cassette tapes from Tony Robbins, and that's the one thing that he kept saying is, go and talk to the people that have already done it.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, oh, come on, it can't be that easy. You know, surround yourself with people that you admire and have been successful at something, anything, in this case, the financial world, you know, the Dan Bentons of the world. You don't want to own it, you just want to control it. And then you know, make good money off of it. And so in this infinite banking game, the thing that I hear, the end game, is to be able to invest in and control those income producing assets, be they real estate, whether you own homes that you're renting like Dwayne did, or an office building. We happen to own an office building that we had run our ad agency out of. And I am so happy that I've got that now, Jim. It's 10,600 square feet and a prime piece of property in the Arcadian neighborhood. It's gone up astronomically, but we've got it all leased out. So I've got that ongoing income. I don't have to rely on just the business of story. So in this end game, it is setting yourself up to be able to finance these income producing assets, property, real estate, or businesses, and not have to pay the large fees and interest rates to the bank that you essentially loan yourself the money out of your own accumulated wealth through your instruments that you then become the banker of you. Is that, I mean, in essence?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You know, and Park, you said something really important there that makes me think that we have to make sure we're thinking of this right. Is we have to think, what's the goal? Right? So what the goal was, you know, probably for your dad, okay, and maybe a little bit further, not for you and me, because we didn't have this opportunity, or not, most of us didn't, but they had pensions. They would work at, if he was an engineer, he would work at, you know, Kodak or something, you know, if depending on where you were and what companies were there, you're an engineer, or you would move and you'd be an engineer at this company for your entire career, right? And you would move up and you would get benefits, but you would get this pension thing. And the pension would say, if you work here this many years, then you go on a grid, and your pre-retirement income, you would get this percentage of it and we guarantee it for the rest of your life. So then I moved to Arizona or Florida. I live out my life playing golf, fishing, doing whatever, and I'm guaranteed I can't run out of money. But then in the 70s, the stock market, it was really having problems. And thank goodness they've got a lot of friends up on Capitol Hill, because they said, well, hey, how can we help you? Well, let's create this thing. Let's get this. These pensions are too expensive for our companies. Let's get rid of that, and let's do it yourself. Let's make it to where it's all on the worker, where the worker has to take the responsibility. And we need all this money to flow into Wall Street because we're hurting. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to give them a great tax break. They don't realize that that's BS. And we're going to create this thing called an IRA, an individual retirement account. It's going to be individual. And we'll sell it as, you know, freedom and all this other bullshit. And they said, okay, great. So you got a big, I mean, $2,500 or something like that, 1974 tax break, which was big then, right? But you got to put your money in this account in Wall Street. So what happened? Well, from 1972 to 1978 or 80, in that range, they went, this is the coolest thing ever. Do you think we could get this to come right out of their paychecks and they never even saw this money? Yeah, let's change the law. We're going to make this 401k, right? Now, 401k came around and people were like, I never even see it. Before, you would get a check for your job. You had to take it to the bank and deposit it. No, we don't want that. We want it to be electronic. We never want them to see this money. And they're too damn lazy. They might get drunk on a Friday night, and they're not going to deposit their check until Monday or Tuesday. I want to use that money as the bank sooner. Okay, so all of this stuff was designed to get money to flow away from you instead of money to flow to you. Okay, that doesn't work, right? There are so many problems. So retirement, it's only been around for 100 years or 120 years, 130 years. It's a false plan. It's a plan based on hope that you don't control. What is the goal? And you said it. Well, I've got this real estate and I get a check every month. And thank God my parents bought this and it's prime. Like, because you don't want to buy shit, right? You want to buy good stuff, right? Now, by the way, it could be in a crummy neighborhood because you're providing income like Dwayne, or places to live like Dwayne McIntyre did, right? Pull the weeds, make it nice. If it's a mobile home park, make people safe in the mobile home park. You don't have to be a slumlord. I mean, you could be the opposite of that. Make them not feel worthless, right? But cash flow. If I'm 25 years old and I had $1 million of passive cash flow coming in and my ideal lifestyle was $500,000, guess what? I'm not retired, because retired, the definition of retirement is to be taken out of service. I can do whatever I want to do when I want to do it, though. I can play golf every day if I want to. 25, I can fish every day. I can do all of those things, but I can still be of service. I can still help people. And like Dan in your neighborhood, he didn't tell your dad, hey, I can't tell you that. It's a secret. Only the people like me know. I can't tell you. He did. He shared. And what your dad did, what did your dad do? He went and took action and bought real estate.
Yeah.
And so did Dan. That's what Tony Robbins was saying. These people that are super successful, that are financially independent, they're not going to tell you, nah, you can't do it. You're a loser. Look, I'm really special. That's why I did it. That's not what they're going to say.
All right, Jim, but the big question I know people are asking themselves right now is saying, all right, that's all well and good, but how do I amass enough cash to be able to go out and buy the building? When we bought our building back in 2003, it was $1.4 million, and I didn't have $1.4 million sitting around, but I did have a good friend who was a banker, and he said, Park, you could get an SBA loan, which he helped me get. And it was a decent, when we took the building over, we had to pay this astronomical interest rate, not through SBA, but through the bank that had it. We were, indebted to them for 3 years until we could refinance it down. But the SBA came in and helped us underwrite that, and that's how we got the bank. So that was the old-fashioned way of doing it. I didn't have that amount of cash, even for a down payment, amassed to do that. How do you do this today with the infinite banking and to amass that kind of equity to make the investment?
So, it's funny, Park, because I help people start infinite banking systems with a few $1,000s a year, and people that start with millions of dollars a year. Everybody's in a different position in their life, right? But it's building blocks. It's if you are 100 pounds overweight, then it takes a lot longer to get to your ideal weight than if you're 10 pounds overweight. And so if you are just starting out, or you've struggled, or you've had a correction, or you're just not in a very good financial situation right now, then you start educating yourself. That's free, right? You start studying. You start finding ways to go buy real estate where you don't have any money down. And I'm not talking about these, you brought this up earlier. What everybody thinks is, hey, this is just another one of those infomercials on how to get rich quick. And I'm not saying get rich quick, by the way. And I'm not saying get rich, because rich does not mean wealthy. Okay. I'm telling you to educate yourself about actually how money works. Study it. Watch courses. We're in the most incredible time in history where I can learn anything I want to learn about online. And in a few seconds, I can educate myself. I can be educating myself. So I would tell you, get ready, because opportunity will come. There will be that property that you can do for 1.4 million, right? There will be somebody that comes to you and says, look, you've been asking me all these questions about real estate. How are you going to buy real estate? You don't have any money. What if I'll sell you part of my portfolio because I'm 75 years old, you're 30 years old. It's hard work, Park, but you just got to take action. You got to find that person that will help you. And hey, would you partner with me on my first deal? If I go find a really good commercial building, Will you put up the money if I find it and show me how to do it?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what, Jim? I'll give you 20% of that deal if you do that. Well,
Okay,
guess
so
what? Yeah.
Jim, say I'm 25 years old,
Yeah.
and I've guessed, out of college or whatever, but I got a decent job. I'm starting to make a little bit of money. I'm still renting. I don't own a home, but I want to start building this investment nest egg, and all I can really part with is $250 a month.
Yeah,
Where do you
start
put
where
it?
you start.
How do you do? You don't put it in a bank account because you're going to earn 0.00001% interest on it. Where do you put it?
So what I would do is I would start to accumulate money, and then I would start putting it into your own banking system. But what I would do is if let's say I put $2,500 away, and the next year I need $1,000 for something. And I think, well, I could have go put it on a credit card and pay 14% interest. Well, no, I'm going to take $1,000 loan for myself, and I'm going to pay myself 14% interest. So now when I get done paying back that loan, I have the $1,000 plus the interest plus another 25. It's the compound effect.
But
right?
where do I put that money that I can borrow from myself other than my savings account?
So in a specially designed insurance contract. And I love when people go, oh, no, life insurance is a bad investment. I'm not telling you to use it as an investment. I'm telling you to use it as a money pool. Because if you have a life insurance contract, especially designed life insurance contract from a mutual insurance company, then you have a contractual right to take a loan up to 100% of your cash value, but not a loan from yourself, a loan of their money, the insurance company's money. You have a contractual right. You don't have to fill out an application. You don't have to tell them what you're going to do with it. You don't have to put together a payment schedule. Nothing. All you have to do is pay the interest at the end of the year, kind of like the $100 million loan that I mentioned earlier.
So let me go back to that $250 example.
Yeah.
This is for me is just to keep it straight. So, all right, I'm putting $250 away every month, investing in this money pool in a mutual insurance company. Over the course of 10 months, I accumulate $2,500. And I want to buy something for $2,000 and I don't have the cash on me. I can go to that money pool at the mutual insurance company, borrow $2,000 because I got $2,500 in there. And all I have to do is pay the interest back to the mutual insurance company. Now, isn't that the same as a bank, though? Wouldn't I just be borrowing it from the bank and having to pay them that same interest?
No, because there's a couple things. One, remember, your money never leaves your account. So it's sitting in there growing in a tax shelter because the life insurance contract, if done right, is a tax shelter. Okay. So your money's growing uninterrupted every single day, tax free. Then you get to borrow the insurance company's money interest only. Okay. So interest only means if it's 5%, on $100, you pay $5 interest at the end of the year. Versus if I amortize that $100 over 5 years or something, okay, I'm going to have to pay probably $25 a year, and because I'm going to pay back the $100 plus probably $25 or $30 in interest over those 5 years. Okay. So when I amortize something, I have principal and interest, but this is interest only. Okay. And it's like a line of credit and at the bank and not a loan. A loan at the bank dictates all of the terms. They dictate your interest rate. They dictate your payment. They dictate your term, meaning how long the loan will be. And there's something that's created in there called volume of interest. The interest rate doesn't matter. I mean, and I'll prove this to you, is if you go buy a mortgage, even when the mortgage rates were 3%, and you're going to buy a $300,000 house, if you pay all of those payments for 30 years, you're going to pay almost $600,000. Okay? Everybody knows that. They're like, yep, that's how it works. It's because of the duration of the loan. Not because of the rate. But that means, Park, that every dollar you pay, 50% goes to the bank and 50% goes to your benefit. Okay, so let me ask you a question. You earn $1. You got to give me half. Do you care what your interest rate is?
No, because I just know what it is. I owe you 50 cents.
Pay you half. Like, I don't want to pay you half. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if I said, well, no, Park, it's a really good loan. You're only paying like 3% interest. But Jim, the rate doesn't matter. That's a distractor. You're distracting me because I'm getting a great rate. You're telling me for every dollar that I earn, I got to give you 50 cents of it. And that's the essence of infinite banking. It's not 3%, 7%, any of that. It's way worse than that. The average person pays over 35% of their net income to interest. Now, think about that for a second. Your net income to interest. And what you're told to do with your money is not eliminate that. You're told, or to pay yourself that, you're told to go put that money in Wall Street in a 401k and earn 6, 7, some other percentage, which is BS too. But that's what we're told to do with our money. It's everything we've been taught about money is wrong. And again, notice, I'm not talking about politics. I don't care if you're conservative or liberal. I don't care. This is money. We're all in this together. Maybe this is how we all come together, is we all realize that this is happening. And, maybe we could put our differences aside and we can figure out that, hey, this, I've seen people, the most liberal people, sitting and strategizing with the most conservative people because they're in the same real estate sector. They all have RV parks or whatever. And I'm like, because this is a uniter. Money unites us. Freedom unites us. And financial independence and freedom, if I'm making so much money, I can give a lot of it away if that's where your heart is.
So, Jim, my final question for this, and then we'll wrap. You probably get this all the time, and it is, if this is so great, how come I haven't heard about it before, and why aren't more people doing it?
Love that. Okay, so the reason is wealthy people, have been doing this forever. Banks have something called bank-owned life insurance. Why would a bank own life insurance? Ask yourself that, right? Corporations have corporate-owned life insurance. Why would they do that? And wait a minute. FDIC and bank regulation only allows banks to keep 25% of their tier 1 assets in life insurance. There's a limit. It's because they design life insurance differently than the consumer does. The consumer buys death benefit because they're sold fear. You think you might die. The insurance company knows you're not, if they have the law of large numbers on their side. And so they'll give you a ton of death benefit. And you say, well, I'm protected. If something happens to me, my family gets all this money. And by the way, that's great. And that's what life insurance people do every day, and they protect people. But that's not why a bank buys life insurance. Yeah, they know there's death benefit and people are going to die. They're going to get a bingo. But they buy it because of the cash accumulation in a tax environment that's tax-free. It's tax invisible. And so wealthy people have always done this. And wealthy people like the Rockefellers, if you're a Rockefeller and you want to start a business, you want money for this or that, you borrow money from the family and you pay it back. The Vanderbilts, which at 124 years ago were at the turn of the century then, they were just as rich as the Rockefellers, but now there's not a Vanderbilt that is a millionaire. They squandered all their wealth. And you know why? It's because it was all given to them because they were Vanderbilts. They were entitled to it. And they didn't learn how to preserve their money. So the answer is wealthy people have known this forever. What Nelson Nash did is he wrote this 92-page book to bring it to the you and me level, to where some guy from Inglewood and in the humble beginnings that my life started, that I could do it. And not only could I do it, but I could teach other people how to do it. And why don't you do it? Because you got to educate yourself. It's a participatory sport. It's a participatory sport. It's not, here, Park, I don't know what you're doing, man. Just here, take my money. Just tell me how much I make at the end of the year. No, that's not how it works, man. You're going to have to get in here, take action. You're going to have to learn. So that answers both those questions. Why doesn't everybody do it? Well, they don't know about it, and they won't take the time and effort to learn. And if somebody understands it, so my challenge, what's my challenge? If somebody understands something, they will do it, right? I just have to educate you about it. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm just trying to educate you. At some point in time, you're going to decide, hey, this is for you or it's not for you. If I go to my doctor and he says, let me explain what's happening in your heart with you eating a cheeseburger every day. And I go, oh, either, okay, I'm fine with that. I mean, 55 is a good age to die. Or I say, you know what? I love my life. I want to live to 100. So what do I got? I mean, so, okay, no cheeseburgers. Now, what do I eat? What do I do? How do I move? All that stuff, right? Some people will do it. Some people won't.
So one of the best books, the best book, the Bible on this, and you got me to read it, and you're right, I read it twice, is Nelson Nash's book, Becoming Your Own Banker. It's in its 5th edition now, and it's all about unlocking the infinite banking concept. And I love it because you're right, Nelson is a fantastic storyteller, and he helps make it simple for you to understand, but it does take a little bit to get through it. And then your new book out, Make Bank Without the Bank. Where can people find your book, Jim?
They can find it on Amazon. They can find it on Audible. And I really like the Audible version. It came out just a few weeks ago, and I listened to it. And what I really liked about it, and I stole this idea from David Goggins and Dan Sullivan. But when they do a book and they do the Audible version, the narrator interviews them after every chapter. And Nick Costco from our team at Create Tailwind, because, Park, I don't think you were like this, but like when I was a kid and they said, we're going to read out loud, I'm the guy that's looking around the room going, which way are we going? Okay, we're going that way. That's 7 people tell me. Okay, so the timing should be, I should have to go to the bathroom at about 2 minutes till, and then if I just stay gone, maybe they won't make me read because I stuttered, I did all this stuff. I did not want to read out loud. So I wasn't going to be the narrator of this book. So Nick reads the book and then he interviews me after each chapter. So you can get it on Amazon, you can get it on Audible. On our community, you can get a breakdown of Nelson's book where I go page by page and explain it to people, right? So that's where you can get the book. And yeah, and you know what? And I want to thank you for inspiring me with that story in that podcast episode, because it helped inspire me to finish the book and actually write it and release it. So thank you.
Oh man, my pleasure. You're doing important work out there, and I get it. I can see how this would really work. It's something I wish I had done as a much younger man than I am right now, but I can attest to the power of owning income-producing properties. I've always had my own business, and we've got real estate now that helps kind of offset those slow times in the business world when you've got income coming from that area as well. So thank you, Jim, for being here, and I really want to thank you for having the guts to share your story. I mean, yours is literally a rags to riches story. You growing up where you did in California, right, and working there in Compton, you could have really gone to the dark side. And I imagine you probably had a lot of people there pushing you towards the dark side. And, you didn't have the typical parental upbringing that so many of us have enjoyed. I mean, you were a fighter from day one. And to what you're doing now, and I really love that point when you said you're about justice, and you were working as a financial planner analyst for management, manager for these people, making them good money, but realize it wasn't just that they weren't making the money that you all thought they were making until you did the math and said,
Yep.
wait a minute, this ain't right. There's got to be a better way. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome, and thank you. Thanks for acknowledging that and seeing that. And I'm just thankful to have opportunity every day to help people, because it's so rewarding, Park, and I know you know this, in helping people tell their story and the great work that you do is when you see somebody turn it around. And I've got hundreds or thousands of success stories, but some people, they just knock the cover off the ball and you go, wow. I remember when they were wondering, is this a scam? Is this just something, and now they're financially independent. They're financially free. It's changed their lives. And I love to see that. I love that. So rewarding.
Well, man, thanks for taking the time to be here, and, happy, prosperous New Year for 2024.
Yeah, absolutely. You too, Park. Thank you.
Are you ready to activate your business's storytelling flywheel to become better known, liked, and trusted? And again, if you're not exactly sure what I mean by the storytelling flywheel, listen to last week's episode with Bob Berg. Maybe you know someone who needs this information too. If so, please share this episode. And if I can help you and your people build your business's storytelling flywheel, just shoot me a note to park@businessofstory.com. Our show was produced by Caden Howell. Thanks, Cade. You're doing a fantastic job with it. Our music is composed by Darius Holbert, who, by the way, last week, for the very first time, I had a new client who has been listening to the show volunteer that she loves the music, that she says it's fun and inspiring, which, believe it or not, in the 8 years that I've produced The Business of Story, I've never once had anybody say they like our music. But now we've got the custom tracks created by Darius Holbert. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. And of course, our community development and marketing is by Marissa Hill. She's amazing. I hope you'll be with me next Monday when the author of The Power of Storytelling, The Art of Influential Communication, Ty Bennett, will share with you several storytelling tips and techniques to help grow your influence. You can use his insights to amplify the effectiveness of your business of story flywheel to become even better known, more liked, and immensely trusted. For what? The final goal is to accelerate the growth of your business. And while you're growing as a more confident, clear, and compelling communicator using the principles you learn from our show, always remember that the most potent story you will ever tell is a story you tell yourself. So make that one epic. Thanks so much for listening.